Welcome to Inside Bremerton. This is the City of Bremerton's video newsletter, focusing on issues and topics important to its citizens. Joining me today are Phil Williams, our Director of Public Works, and Kathleen Cahall, our Water Resources Manager, and they're here to share some really good news on federal stimulus funding that the city has received. This funding comes down from the feds to the state to the cities. Is that correct, Phil?
That's correct.
Tell us how did we get that funding? Was there an application process?
There was, and it is good news. And I think as everybody is painfully aware, the world economy took a huge turn for the worst at the end of 2008, and that's continued on into the beginning of this year. And one of the responses to that problem at the national level was Congress passed this American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, which most people may not recognize that name, but that's where these stimulus monies that everybody's heard about are coming from. This is federal funding that in large part has been passed through the states for distribution to worthy projects throughout the country in the hopes that we would accomplish some very meaningful things in terms of the infrastructure and also boost employment and construction jobs, design jobs, and keep people employed. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody has a lot of hope that that'll be successful. And as a result of that, there's a huge emphasis to try to get these monies in play quickly. And so we have very short timelines to get these projects completed, mm-hmm. Which in some ways is a good thing.
Right.
The two projects that we're here to talk about today have been on our capital spending plan for quite some time. But for this federal funding, we would have had to have done these or funded them some other way, mm-hmm. probably out of rate capital, and our ratepayers would have had to pay for them. But we were fortunate. Monies came through the Department of Health, and that was distributed through their existing grant and loan program, and we applied for support for the ultraviolet treatment project, which Kathleen will talk about in a minute, and were successful. And we applied for funding for a wastewater collection system or a sewer system for the Gorst community through the Department of Ecology and their state revolving fund loan program. And we're successful there too. And the total package is about $14.6+ million in capital support, and the vast majority of that is grants, which don't have to be repaid, about $12 million.
Fabulous.
So it's a wonderful.
Phil, what was the turnaround time once the money was sent to the state and then the state called for application mm-hmm. or input? What was the turnaround time?
Well, they did, and that was a little bit chaotic. This has never happened before. It's unprecedented, and these programs already existed at the state level, and it was right. the federal government's preference that they not create any new distribution channels. They wanted to work with the states to do that. And so ecology, their normal process takes a good deal longer. Right. So they tried to really speed that up, and they had a new round of applications, and the whole thing took about a month to 6 weeks, and we got awarded a grant.
Boom.
Yeah, it's great.
Wow, it is very good. So aside from these two projects, do you anticipate any other federal stimulus money coming out for us?
There are other federal stimulus programs. There's energy efficiency programs, which we intend to get our oar in the water on as soon as there's an opportunity. Transportation was a huge part of the
right.
package.
Right.
A lot of money came through the states for distribution. Bremerton got access to those through the port to support a transportation project out there, which is called the Cross-Skia Connector, mm-hmm. Which will help the industrial development base here in Kitsap County. That's through the port, however. The city didn't receive any specific funding for transportation projects, but mm-hmm. we were very, very happy with these two grants for the utilities.
Great. Well, Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you.
If you'll remember, we did a great program on Inside Bremerton on our forestry land. Kathleen took us up to our Casad Dam, which was a beautiful, splendid day. Kathleen, at that time you mentioned about an ultraviolet treatment system, and boom, boom, here it is. Right. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, at that time, that was about 4 or 5 months ago, we knew this project was potentially on the horizon. We have some regulatory requirements to install another disinfection system in 2012. When the stimulus grants became available, like Phil mentioned, we applied for the ultraviolet light treatment, and it ranked very high because it's a water quality issue, and so it ranked high, and we received the funding, and we're just thrilled about that. So it's going to move that project up.
Great. Tell us how it works, where it's going to be. Well, give us the ins and outs of it. I know nobody's ever going to see it other than, of course, your technicians, but what does it do for us?
Well, it's going to add another barrier to our already fantastic water system, and right now we disinfect with chlorine, and chlorine's a very effective disinfectant, works very well. However, it's not effective on a particular organism called Cryptosporidium. I know that's a mouthful. And a federal regulation requires us to monitor for Cryptosporidium and also to add treatment for that. So the first thing we did here the past 2 years was test for this organism. We did not find it in our watershed, which is a great thing. However, we still are required to put in the treatment, an additional barrier for that, just in case it ever is an issue. We don't have to worry about that now. So the ultraviolet light was our selection for treating for that because it is a very effective treatment system.
Is it a big system? Is it going to take lots of installation? Is it a huge looking unit?
Well, it's not terribly big. Ultraviolet is, it's really kind of fascinating because people might be kind of confused. How can you treat water with light? But ultraviolet light's been in use for over 50 years, and again, it's very, very effective. And what we have are lamps. We take electrical power and put that through a lamp, and that lamp emits a light. Ultraviolet light is same as it would come from the sun. It's a very small wavelength. It's the same kind of light that would give you a sunburn. Is the same light that they found. It has what's called a germicidal effect, a disinfection, and it's very effective in treating microorganisms. So what it does, if there's a microorganism there, the light shines on that, and it inactivates the DNA in the organism so it cannot reproduce. So if a cell cannot reproduce, then it cannot make you sick. It makes it harmless. So that's how ultraviolet works.
Did you say this was going to be it's federally mandated by 2012? Was that correct, Kathleen?
By 2012, we were to have an additional disinfection in addition to the chlorine. And the reason we chose ultraviolet is because it's much less expensive than the other options we had, which were ozone. We could have done that. We could have added a filtration plant. That would have met the requirements at much, much higher cost. And we've done a little looking into that as the effect it would have on our water rates. And if we were to install a filtration plant, it could potentially double our water rates. So that's something we want to not have to do if we can do other just as effective treatments like this one. So again, we were thrilled to get grant money, which doesn't happen too often in drinking water, to get the federally funded. So this will help keep our water rates low and add that much more treatment and benefit to the water system.
And as Phil mentioned off camera, a higher level of comfort for our customers.
You know, drinking water, you always want to be on the safe side with drinking water, and this will add that much more safety factor to our drinking water.
So the design of the system is in the works, Kathleen?
It's in the works. Very quick turnaround on this. Of course, the big impetus for this is to stimulate the economy, which water and sewer projects do a very good job of stimulating the economy. I saw a study that said for every $1 that you invest in a water or sewer project, potentially $9 ends up back into the economy. Because lots goes into water and sewer projects. You have not only the materials, you have engineers to plan it, you have surveying, you have technicians, you have, of course, then the materials that you use to build the infrastructure. You have folks to operate it, and so a lot goes into that.
Wow, very, very good.
I was just going to add, and the bottom line, I think we've touched on it, is this project, which is a meaningful project for all of our water users, whether they're in the city or outside the city, will be done 2 years earlier than we had anticipated, and it'll be done with money other than theirs, the ratepayers' money. And that, just rough order of magnitude, would save every single water customer about $3 to $4 a month for the next 20 years. So
That's a chunk.
yeah, that's
That
a
is
lot of
really
money.
very good. Wow, very thrilling. 14.6 million is what the city has received. And how much of that is for the water treatment?
About $6 million was the grant we received for drinking water.
Fabulous. Well, let's start talking about the sewer project, Phil.
Sure.
And let's first of all do an overview. We know it's going to be in Gorst. Tell us a little bit about all those little idiosyncrasies.
Well, this map, I think, depicts the planning area for the wastewater collection system, and hopefully people can recognize this is Sinclair Inlet, the head end of Sinclair Inlet, and the community of Gorst that surrounds that. What you're seeing here is the dominant feature on this graphic is I guess it's a salmon-colored overlay, which the local health district, Kitsap County Health District, has developed over time, and they call it their failure area. And very habitually, almost routinely, on-site septic tank and drain field systems just do not work well in that area. They don't work well and they don't last very long, and they have to be replaced, and that's very expensive. So there's a financial element to it, but perhaps much more importantly, there's an environmental element to this. And we have Gorst Creek that comes into the head end of Sinclair Inlet, and you have the head end of Sinclair Inlet itself, both of which have compromised water quality and are on the state's list for cleanup due to fecal coliform contamination or bacterial contamination of the surface water. And largely because of septic tanks and drain fields that aren't working properly, and they end up with untreated wastewater going into the surface water. It's a big problem. People have been talking about it for 20, 25 years. It's been recognized. The health district's been working really hard with the individual owners of those systems to try to upgrade them over time. They've done a good job, but it needs a sewer system to really solve the problem. And there's been a lot of planning on that. There's been a lot of efforts and discussion, but really the funding piece was the missing piece. No one had ever really put together a package that would work. Part of that is because, you know, it's a relatively depressed area. There's not a lot of resources there to access to pay for a system.
Right.
And probably that was never going to change. And so there's a lot of good fortune here. One thing the city did that I think turned out to be a wonderful decision, our council supported the construction of the Southwest Bremerton sewer. So we built a force main all the way around the inlet over to the bottom of Anderson Hill Road, where we have a pump station to serve the city properties that are on the south side of the inlet. So that was an investment the city made. Well, it comes right through Gorst. So now the only missing piece is the collection system in Gorst to be able to access that force main and get all the wastewater from Gorst into our treatment plant. Right at the time we're finishing up this project, along comes the stimulus package. We applied for the funding and we hit a home run for a lot of reasons. I think the income levels here are relatively low, even for Bremerton, which is much lower than the rest of Kitsap County. That gave us quite a few points in the process. The severity of the problem, the water quality problem, has been identified in the state plans for a long time. All those things kind of combined to bring our project up to number 2 on a list of 195 applicants statewide for funding. We ended up number 2 for the collection system and number 6 for a second grant that we applied for to support the project. Because the net result of this, we're not just going to build the collection system in the street where we have lines out in the street that individual homeowners then need to connect to. We're going to actually build all those connections directly to the houses and put sewer systems in for everybody there.
Cost to the residents in Gorst?
Well, it could very well be zero for most of them. There's some details we're still working on that, but there's enough funding, I think, there to provide connections to almost everyone that currently exists in Gorst, both businesses and residential. Now, the businesses will have to pay for their own connection. The residential properties can be funded with grant money.
Fabulous. So fabulous for the infrastructure of Gorst.
Yes.
And potential new construction in that community,
Mm-hmm.
upgrading homes, just everything. Could
Yeah, it'll-
really help that area tremendously.
You're absolutely right. It not only solves a really big environmental problem, and we're very proud of that and the ability to do that, but I think it really is going to stimulate some redevelopment in Gorst, that'll probably improve the looks and the function of that community
Right.
quite a bit as we go forward.
Right. When will we start seeing some activity, some actual dirts and shovels and things
Dirts
starting
and
to
shovels.
go?
A lot of activity going on right now.
Right.
No dirts and shovels yet, but we're purchasing properties. There's 2 pump stations, one located right in this triangular piece and another one down right in here. This one will serve the south half of the Gorst wastewater system, and this one will serve the north half. We're buying those properties. We've engaged an engineering consultant to do the design. They're working on that. We've already done the environmental compliance, and we have to have the design complete by the 17th of September. If you can imagine
Oh,
that.
that's quick.
Yeah, that's a $7.4 million capital project that we hadn't done any design on, and we have to have the design complete by the 17th of September.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of activity going on right now. It's
There's
just,
a lot of work happening.
yeah, and then we'll go out and we have to have the money obligated and under contract for construction by the 1st of December of this year. So there'll be a little bit of construction probably at the end of this year. Most of it will occur in the early part of 2010.
Will it impact the folks that are commuting around there, and there are thousands that commute through there? Will it be a big impact to those folks?
No, I don't believe it will at all. We did have some impacts when we built the Southwest Bremerton sewer through that highway alignment, but the building of the collection system shouldn't impact the main highway much at all. There'll be one crossing that we'll have to make right down in here, but that'll be a boring and jacking underneath the highway and shouldn't interrupt traffic. Now there will be some local street traffic there that'll be impacted, but nothing particularly severe, I don't think.
Really good news for our community, and fabulous funding that's come down through the federal government to our states and right to our own dear city for this important infrastructure, not only water but sewer in our community. Are there other areas in our city, Phil, that are a little compromised with septic systems?
We do have some sort of isolated pockets of on-site treatment systems within the existing city limits, but more so it's in areas that are we call UGAs, or urban growth areas for the city of Bremerton. Places like Rocky Point, Marine Drive. There's the West Bremerton UGA up in the top right of this picture. Certainly now Gorst. There are some places like that that aren't yet, except for Marine Drive is in the city, and that does need to be sewered. But other areas that aren't yet in the city, and obviously providing sewer service is going to be a key to getting them in the city.
Great news. Thanks so much for coming in to share with us, and stay tuned as we keep up abreast on these projects and keep you up to date on what's happening with them and the stimulus funding coming into Bremerton. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time inside Bremerton.